going to talk about today. So when now means now is really that moment. And I'm going to ask each of you in the room, have you ever had that moment where you just think, I can't do this job anymore? I've just had enough. Show of hands. Yeah? We're going to talk a little bit about this because what I see when I mentor, and I mentor and coach a lot of people, men and women, what I see when they get to that point is a moment of panic, a moment of feeling stuck. I have to get out of this job. I can't stand it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. And so they leap into another role, but it's similar to the role that they've already got because it's a comfortable place and they know that they can land something. Instead of really thinking about it and planning, they just leap into the next thing. And then 6 months later, they think, why? Why do I not like this job? And then they start on that treadmill again. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because that's not a pivot. That's a panic response. So we all remember, fight, flight, the fight, flight response that we had during COVID. That's kind of what you're doing from a career perspective. The other book, which is being given away, and I must thank Granite very kindly for purchasing 10 of the new book, which is on sale on Amazon. Plug, plug, plug. That's enough of the shameless plugs.
It's a bestseller now, I believe, judging.
It is actually a bestseller, so I've sold enough for it to hit bestseller category. So that is really exciting because we've all lived through yet another digital transformation. Well, this is not another digital transformation. And it is not exactly what it says it is. So we have a couple of books to give away at the end of this session. Thank you. So let's get to it, shall we? So career pivot. Who has done a career pivot? Yeah? I'm going to talk a little bit about my career pivot when I first started. It's a little while ago now. I'm not going to give ages. No, well, maybe. I was 15 and I wanted to be a singer. Actually, that's all I wanted. I was known for it. I was singing at the time. I'd landed my first role in the South Australian Youth Opera and I wanted to sing full-time. That's all I wanted to do. I said to my parents, I don't want to be a doctor. I'm dropping all of that. I'm not doing any of those studies. I am now going into the performing arts side of things at my high school, and that's what I want to do, and I want to be a singer. And I watched my parents die a little bit inside. But I wanted to do it, and it was what my passion was. So I started singing, and I sang a lot. And then I realised I was in Adelaide, a small little country town sort of at the outskirts of Adelaide, and I realised I was a big fish in a little pond and I needed to go to grander waters. So I moved to Melbourne and started singing over here and started singing in a couple of recording studios, doing backing vocals, etc. Met my then partner who became my husband and we started to perform. And I performed for 7 years. Weddings, parties, Yarrawonga Football Club. We were their grand final. Always a treat. I'd made it, allegedly, because I'd wanted to be a singer. I hadn't really planned out what that would look like. I just kind of knew that's what I wanted to do until that last event that I sang at, which was 6 grueling hours of a wedding in Patterson Lakes where I was asked to sing Mustang Sally 8 times that night. There is nowhere on God's green earth that it is okay to ask a singer to sing Mustang Sally 8 times in a night. But as they drank more and more and more, that's what they wanted to hear. And they are the customer, so you kind of need to keep them happy. And I remember lugging out all of the gear, getting it into the station wagon that we owned, the old Commodore station wagon. We called him George. And I said to my then boyfriend, soon-to-be husband, if I have to sing Mustang Sally one more time, I'm going to hang myself. I cannot do this anymore. It was that moment that I said, I don't want to do this. This is not what I want to be. But I was known as a singer. All of my friends knew me as a singer. Everyone back in Adelaide knew me as a singer. Whenever I'd visit people, it would be, oh, how's the singing going? What are you doing in that space? Are you famous yet? Wasn't famous yet. Maybe at that wedding. And it was the most terrifying moment that I experienced in my career journey. I've had more frightening but not terrifying moments. But that moment when I realised that I don't want to do this, but I'm known for it. Things that were going through my head, what will people think? They'll see me as a failure. Because all I talked about was singing. I mean, it was ad nauseum. Until I said to my friendship circle, I floated the idea. I said, I don't want to do that anymore. I need normalcy in my life. And what I saw as normal was a 9-to-5 job. Not going to a pub and lugging in gear at 7 o'clock at night and staying till 3 in the morning and singing and lugging out gear and then doing that the next night and the next night and the next night. I wanted normalcy. I wanted to be able to get up in the morning, have coffee with my husband, and go off to the office. That's what I wanted. I guess, or so I thought. But no, yes, it is exactly what I wanted because I've built an entire career on it now. But back then, early 20s, really scary moment. Who's felt that terror? Yeah, you felt it, haven't you? It's that moment where you think, I'm not really sure what this is, but I know I have to do something. It is when we are in the most pain that we want to make the biggest change, or the most radical change. And it is when we're at most risk that we feel most alive, right? Why do you think I scuba dive? I used to ride motorbikes as well, but that became even more dangerous. I figured I could fend off a white pointer. I don't think I could fend off a Mack truck, right? So I was stuck with scuba diving. But yeah, it's that risk. What are you prepared to risk to get to the outcome that you want? So I knew I needed to pivot and knew I needed to do something. I mean, I had to eat, right? You got to do something. And I wanted more. I wanted more. And it was like, but what is that more? Then I decided, okay, I don't know what businesses I want to go into, but I do know that I have this grand idea of what my life would look like. Who has a view of what an adult is? No, at any point, because I still haven't reached this view. And I'm like, God, that's what I think an adult is. For me, an adult, and this is because I was a kid when I saw this, but I thought that's what it is to be an adult. An adult lives in an apartment in the city, in a sky-rise apartment, and they come home every night with a paper bag, and in that paper bag of their groceries, it's got a head of celery and a French stick sticking out of it, and they come into their apartment. That's what an adult is to me. And in my mind, it's like, well, I'm still not an adult because I don't have the apartment in the city, and, well, we don't really have paper bags anymore, so I don't think I'm ever going to make that. But so in my mind, it was like, I've got these grand ideas, these grand dreams. How am I going to affect those? I didn't know where to start. And I thought, I don't know any organisations, I don't know any businesses. I had no idea. I was a singer, for Christ's sake. That's what it was that I was doing. So I didn't need to know any of that. So a really good friend of mine said, well, why don't you try office temping? Anybody here remember what an office temp was? Yeah, excellent. You're not that old you're not that young that you don't know what it is. When I talk at this event and I talk about office temping, some of these young people there are like, I don't know what that means. It's not a contract. No, you're in an office for a day, maybe a week. I wanted to do office temping, so I thought, easy peasy. I had done, when I was 15 at school, I did business studies with Mrs. Best, and she taught me how to type 20 words a minute on a manual typewriter at 95% accuracy, so I knew I could do that. I knew I could balance a checkbook because eventually my husband would need me to balance a checkbook when I got married. I knew I could cook mac and cheese for dinner for my husband when I got married. And I knew that I could act as a receptionist because we were taught how to speak to individuals on a phone, and we were taught how to use commander phone systems. So I learned all of that at high school, and God bless you, Mrs. Best, because I can still balance a checkbook even though I don't need to use one anymore. What is interesting, however, is that I thought, hey, I can do this. How hard could it be? I went to 30 interviews at 30 different temp agencies. Did you know that there are over 45 or 55 temp agencies there were back then in Melbourne at the time? Well, I went to most of them and got knocked back for roles. It was like, oh, no, you just don't have any of the skills that we're looking for an office temp. And I started to feel like, oh my gosh, I've made a mistake. Who in this room has gotten to that point? I want to make a career pivot. I know I need to do this. I'm taking a big risk, but nobody is giving me a go. Nobody's given me a chance. Yeah? This is where sponsorship comes in. Who knows the difference between a coach, a mentor, and a sponsor? Well, you think you might know? Some of you think you might know? I use an analogy that I use at my old workplace. I used to work as the global CIO at PointsBet, gaming and wagering, and I love to say this. Walking into my office was like walking into my 15-year-old son's bedroom. It just didn't smell as bad sometimes. No, really. You think I'm kidding? I'm not kidding. I invite you all to go and view that office. Anyway. Sorry, no, not my son's bedroom, man. He's 27. I think his room's just as messy as it was then. But hey, he lives out of home and it's not my mess to worry about anymore. I can't even go and visit him. It's like, have you cleaned the kitchen? Because actually, no, it's more that, have you cleaned the toilet? Because it's a long drive. And do I have to go to the McDonald's around the corner before yeah. Anyway, 27 years old. Who would have thought? Sorry, lost my train of thought. I'm thinking of his room. No, that's fine. So where I got to was this point around this career pivot and this panic, this fear, and the sponsorship. So a coach helps you win the game. A mentor helps you win the season. But the sponsor gets you on the pitch, gets you noticed, gets you that branding deal. That's the difference. A sponsor is the person that sees something in you that you didn't think you had in yourself. So I go to I think it was maybe my 31st, 32nd interview at Hayes Personnel. And Cheryl Finlayson was the woman there. And I walk in and she says, oh, so you want to be a temp, right? So they interviewed you for temping. And I said, yeah, I really do. And she sat me down and we started to talk. And she said, you look really familiar to me. I'm not quite sure why you look so familiar. And she said, tell me a little bit about your background. And I thought, oh, here we go. Because all they wanted to hear about was the singing stuff. And it was really interesting, but nobody wanted to hire me. They thought that was really interesting, but they couldn't see any potential. So I started to talk about the singing. And Cheryl said, oh, my God, you were at Patterson Lakes. I was like, yes, that was me. And she said, wow. She said, that seemed really grueling. It was like sort of 7 hours you were singing. I said, yes, it was. She commented on how good Mustang Sally was. It was great, excellent. We had an instant bond and an instant connection. Then she said to me, how much luck have you had getting temping jobs? I said, none. I said, I've interviewed for about 30 different temping roles and nothing. She said, okay, talk to me about what it is that you do. How do you get a gig? I'm really interested in understanding that process. As I started speaking, she started writing things down. I said to her, well, I usually have to liaise. We had 3 agents at the time. I have to liaise with my agents, and sometimes I have to actually meet with the people that I'm going to be singing for. So sometimes they'll want to meet with the band beforehand if it's for a wedding, if it's for a big wedding, and then they'll want to hear your tape. So they'll need to hear that. Then we need to know the size of the space. So I'll usually go and estimate the size of the space, what sort of a PA system we're going to need to hire for it, because the bigger the space, the bigger the PA. And all of that equipment that we need to have. So you need to understand that. And then I said to her, and then depending on the nature of the gigs, it could be a gig that pays a little bit less, but we get 6 gigs in a row, or it could pay a little bit more, but we only get the 1 gig. So we have to work out what's going to make the most financial sense to us before we accept the gig. And I walked her through all of that, and she was writing things down, feverishly writing this stuff down. And she said, wow, that's amazing. I said, what's amazing? She said, you've got logistics background, project management background, stakeholder engagement. She was saying all these words, and I knew they were words. I had no idea what she was talking about. She said, I think I can place you in some temping work because you have this transferable skill I had no idea about. I talk a lot about transferable skills because when we go for roles, what's the first thing you forget? You forget all the transferables. It's the recency effect, right? So you just remember the stuff you've just done. And unless you write that down and you're keeping a log of all the great stuff you've done throughout the course of your career, who does that? Anybody here? Do you sit there and fill in a spreadsheet and go, wow, yeah, I did this week and this is what value I had created for the organisation? None of you do that. You're saying that you've done, really? How far back do you go?
I don't.
Do you? Wow, I'm absolutely. This man is a bloody champion.
That's called a spreadsheet.
It is exactly what you need to do. It is a log of all of the great things you've done. Now, this is the awful bit of the session where I'm actually going to get you to start thinking about a few things. Okay, so I wanted a career pivot. I sort of had a loose plan. But what I didn't really know is what I wanted to do, so I started to temp. So that would give me insight. It would give me a view of what the different organisations were that are out there. And I tell you, I temped at BP, at chemical companies, all manner of companies that needed a temp for a day or a week. I temped at those organisations. But the one organisation that absolutely was a game changer for me was this little company on Queen Street, or Queen's Road at the time, or South Bank. And I went into it, and it was a 2-week assignment. It was this little company called Apple Computer. Not Apple Computers with an S, and I got absolutely told off by the general manager when I answered the phone. Good morning, Apple Computers, Mary-Beth speaking. He said to me, no, it's Apple Computer. There was a Newton sitting up there. There were the old Macs. I mean, this was 1990 something. I don't want to give my age away, but it was a long time ago. They were using this thing called email. No, I'm not kidding. What we used to use when I was temping is you'd get this little pad of paper, and when you get a phone call, okay, Simon's not in today, so I will make a note, and then I take all my notes and I go up to the little pigeonholes and I put all the notes in, and that was my job. I was on reception. Oh, no. At Apple Computer, no S. You had to type an email. I was like, it took me like a day to work it out. I remember getting home and saying to my husband, oh my God, I was at this assignment today and they used this thing called email. Well, that's never going to take off. So I'm not a futurist. I'm just going to put that out there. But he got really excited. He said, oh my God, you're working at Apple. And I said, okay. But it really introduced me to technology, and it really shifted, and it helped me create a plan of where I wanted to go. Now, back then, CIO didn't exist, but IT general manager did. And it wasn't as grandiose as it is now, but it was at least a North Star that I could look at and start to plan forward for. But what I needed to do as I was temping was to start to think about what I truly wanted. Who here today is at that point that you're thinking about a career pivot? Is anyone? Do you have a view of what that looks like? Possibly a view you think maybe, not so much?
Struggling with it.
Struggling with it, yeah, absolutely.
Because what you said before, what you know is comfortable.
Yeah. What you don't know is uncomfortable. It's in the uncomfortableness that you'll grow, and that you probably find something that would just blow your mind. So maybe trust in the process. So what I like to do when I work with individuals is a little thing called a joy matrix. And I ask them to think about, well, I actually get them to go all the way back as you've done, Ronald, in their career, and look at every single job they've ever held, and basically gauge how much joy it brought them and what it was in that role that brought them that joy. What transferable skills did they learn in that role? And I get them to do it all the way back to the very beginning. And the reason I do that is because there's some little gems at the very beginning of your career you might not even realize. And I'm going to get you to do a little bit of something for me this morning. And I might even ask someone to sort of stand up and tell me what they've written. But I'm going to give you a bit of an insight as to why I say go back to the very, very beginning. I'm not going to get you to do that today because we don't have a couple of hours and it usually takes a while to work through this. But when I started to do this, I really wanted to understand me. Not Mary-Beth the singer, but Mary-Beth the worker, and what does that look like? Now, when I was singing, I also did other jobs, right? Because you don't get, singing jobs. It's not like every single night I was singing. I had to augment my income with other things. And when I first started singing as a 15-year-old, I started out at Hungry Jack's. Best bloody job I ever had. Because now I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, and what I didn't realise back in the day was that. All of that taught me time management, how to manage finances, how to deal with customers, and how to steal fries when you're working on the drive-through. So, I mean, I learned all of that at that role, but what I enjoyed about it was the camaraderie, but I really loved the processes. So for me, process is a massive big thing. It brings me a great deal of joy to streamline, to make things run really smoothly. Had I not done this process of working through the joy matrix, I wouldn't have recognised that that's where that passion arose. So what I'd like you to do is think about one job that you've held that was absolutely joyous for you, absolutely floated your boat. And I want you to write down why. I worked at a company called Toll Solutions, which was a startup within the Toll group. My God, it was the most fun. I remember leaping out of bed every morning on a Monday going, oh, I can't wait to get to work, because it was interesting. We were like cowboys in an IT world. We would just put stuff into production and break stuff and be like, oh, how awesome. It was great. We had a great time. And I keep now looking for a startup. The reason I took the PointsBet role, because it was kind of startup to scale up, and that really interested me because I was looking for that adrenaline rush, which is what you get in a startup. So I would like you all to pick up your pens. Think about one role, just one. Or into your phones, whatever works for you best. One role that's brought you absolute joy, and why. Think about now, once you've written it down, so you've written down your role and why it brought you joy. So on a scale of, say, 0 to 10, 0 being no joy, 10 being, oh my God, and 11 because the amplifier can turn up to 11, which, and if any of you got that pop culture reference, none of you got it, never mind, through to the keeper. Spinal Tap, yeah? Okay, because when you have to explain the joke, at least ceases to be funny. So now think about 3 of the skills that you learnt from that job that would be transferable to the next. And then finally, if you're in the current role, this might not be pertinent, but there will have been in that role some game changer, something that happened that led you to the next role that you were on. Now, it might have been a really good game changer. It might have been something that was extraordinary. It could have been somebody saw something in you and offered you another role or an opportunity. Why don't you write that down? Understanding that piece, what that game changer was, will also help you to start to look for and seek sponsorship as you're going forward. You can ask me questions at any point here. I'll just keep talking. And I'm a scuba diver, so we can talk underwater. Do you want to share, Ronald?
Yeah.
Are we all ready? Do a few of you feel comfortable sharing with the group?
No.
Oh my God, Ronald, you sat up the front, you knew. You see, everyone else, no one else here, you guys are next. So please stand, Ronald. So introduce yourself, Ronald.
Ronald Coleman. My main skills are in the project management space in IT.
Lovely.
The role I had that really floated my boat was a role at Alcatel-Lucent. I had a team of about 80 people, and we were busted them up into 5 different teams. It was a bleeding edge technology piece of work. I like bleeding edge stuff. And that's been throughout my career. There's a lot of bleeding edge delivery. But what floated my boat the most there was I was managing a team that was motivated to deliver. And I look at that as being, part of my influence. And
Yeah.
the way I got them to deliver and to get excited about delivering was through respect. Respecting them, and through that they respected me. I could get them to walk on water. I'm sure, how many have been in a project where we've got to work this weekend and you get told on Friday? And everyone goes, oh.
We've all been there. We've all been there.
So I changed that by
Fantastic.
giving them respect.
Transferables?
Earning respect, team management, and soft tools in project management.
Fantastic. Thank you. Big hand for Ronald. That was fantastic. What I got from that now is if you're sitting there on that precipice and you're thinking, I don't know what the next thing is, you now know that you love team management. You want to be a management contributor. For some in technology, they're thrust into management, but they want to be an individual contributor. But the only thing we've got available for them to make the sort of money that they would make, that they're seeking to make, is as a manager, but they're just not good at it, don't enjoy it. So there's some shifting and changing. So now you've got that, you understand some of those transferables from that role, and you've probably taken them with you for every other role.
Correct.
But if you start to dig down even deeper, there'll be even more granular transferables, and it's in the transferables, that's where the gold is. Because what I urge you to do as you're at that point, that terrifying moment of that, I have to make a change. Start to think about transferable skills and how you will weave those into the narrative of the conversation you have when you speak to the recruiter, when you speak to the HR director, when you speak to however many rounds you need to go through in order to land the role of your dreams or the dream right now. Those transferable skills are going to really help flesh out that narrative for you. Because it creates stories. Who's heard of the STAR principle? Situation, task, action, result, It's a story. If you can get really lovely, succinct stories that can fold into that 3 or 4 of your transferables, it's going to make you seem much more attractive from a hiring perspective if you're going to look at that career pivot. So that's great. You're going to sit back and you're going to go away from this and you're going to go, oh, that was really interesting of Mary-Beth. What I'm going to challenge you to do is to actually try and do that activity and think about the game changer and write that down for every role you've had in your career. Do what Ronald does and go back and look at all of the great things you did. Spend the time, create a reservoir of things that you've delivered, of the value you have created. Because it will do 2 things for you. It will give you great stories to say at and to help you when you're looking at your next role. What it will also do is remind you of just how amazing you are at the job that you do and the jobs that you have done. And if you're feeling a little bit less than, and some of us when we're going into this terrifying moment of a career pivot feel a bit less than, you start to question, am I doing the right thing? You'll actually remember, actually, you know what, I'm pretty good at stuff. And here's the proof. I have proof that I'm good at this stuff. And it will help you when you are actually speaking to recruiters. It will help differentiate you.
Another good tip along those lines, Mary-Beth, if alongside going through the whole career is, it sounds obvious, but we have a big thing in our business around a daily to-do list. Still I've been doing this sort of work for 30 years and every morning doing a bit of a to-do list, or emailing it to yourself or however you prefer to record it. And then at the end of the day, just a couple of minutes reflection around that worked, that didn't work, you've got to carry that over. And it sounds very obvious, but still there are loads of people out there who don't actually do a bit of a daily to-do list. And it's actually quite rewarding and beneficial when you tick the tasks off. And, that's more of a condensed version of, I suppose, of what you're talking about, really.
It is. And that daily task list, I'm an analog task girl.
Yeah.
I can't do it in Outlook. I know it gives you that. You can do it in Outlook, but there's nothing quite as scoring through that damn thing that I didn't want to get done, instead of the ticking that the task is done with a mouse click. Yeah, so there's something really tactile about that. I absolutely agree. But at the end of the week, what I do suggest to the people that I mentor is keep a journal of the value you've added.
Yeah.
and write that down at the end of each week or at the end of each fortnight, whatever makes sense for you if you're working on a major project, but the value being something quantitative or qualitative, because that then can sit in your resume and it really helps to level up your resume compared to peers. I mean, gone are the days where you sit there going, stakeholder engagement, and that's what you'd put in your resume. You need to actually qualify or quantify those things in your resume. So you've got a joy matrix, you know it brings you joy, you know what your transferable skills are, but you haven't written a plan, you don't have a plan, you've got a view, maybe a stronger vision, maybe you don't have a vision at all, but now is the time to actually start to think about, all right, I need a plan, I need to get there. For me, it was general manager something. Was it IT at the time? No, it was just general manager because I saw the general manager at one of the temping assignments and I just thought, wow, he's so cool, I want to do that. Why not? I actually became connected with him and we became very good friends until he passed, and he was one of my greatest sponsors because I just thought, I want to do what he does. Now I'm doing what he does. I'm not so sure I want to do what he does, but I'm doing what he does. And I hit that goal. So you have to have a North Star. You have to kind of reach for it. And what does the plan give you? Who's a project manager here? Who's ever managed a project? What does it give you? Milestones. It gives you things to work towards. And as part of that, you might sit back going, well, you know what? I want to get to that, but I might need a little bit more business acumen. And what could that look like? Well, what happens if, you've all managed projects. What do you do if the project's going off track? Okay, you course correct, don't you? You do. Then you go to the general manager and you tell them it's going to cost another 1.5 million and you hope you don't get the sack. But other than that, because bad news doesn't get better with age, that lovely adage. But yeah, big North Star because you want to keep that line of sight. But small steps. A small step could be, so for myself, I wanted to get to general manager, but I felt like I still needed to perform somehow. Still needed to do that. So I went off and did training and assessing because it let me stand up in front of people and perform. Nothing more exciting than seeing Mary-Beth teach you Oracle systems. I'm a great Oracle trainer, don't laugh. But yeah, I just wanted to perform, so that was how I could do that. But then I went in, and that next step on from that was change management. Next step on from that, I thought, oh, that's really interesting. But now I really want to understand true change, and that's software development, right? Because that's where that is. And I started finding myself moving in this way that was not linear. And your career progression will not be linear. I like to, this is my analogy. I bought a Tesla in 2019. Took 6 months for the Tesla to come. Love it. Still, I've got my second Tesla now. I love my Tesla, right? So not so much Elon Musk, bit weird. Bit weird. But I'd have a chip implanted in my brain. I'd do that. So I buy the Tesla, and when it first came out, its first iteration of its navigation was a little bit less than. So I remember getting into the car and driving in the Tesla and being like, where is it going? I would eventually get to my end point, but it was going really, really interesting ways. And your career is going to be the same. You may do lateral moves because that's what's on offer and it sounds interesting. You may take a step back because it sounds interesting and you might learn something new. It's not always going to be step up to the next step up to the next step up. But know that it's okay, that it's not always a step up and a step up. Sometimes that lateral move is necessary to help you reach your end goal. So it's not a failure. I talk to so many people who say, oh, well, I've had to take a lateral step. I was an IT manager within Toll, managing 8,000 people in a business unit in Toll, and took a sideways move to move into Specsavers when I decided that I wanted to, try something new. Been at Toll for 15 years, felt I could be a bit institutionalised, right, in that transport logistics space. So I moved across to Specsavers. It was a lateral move, but it was absolutely a calculated lateral move because I knew I needed to broaden my skill set. I needed to broaden the businesses that I worked within. I needed to learn something new, and retail/medical was really interesting, and it was an opportunity that I wanted to grab. So this is one of those little micro steps that I took. But it also helped broaden my view and my worldview. And it enabled me to then get the next step and the next step. So absolutely, you're right. Take small little steps. But the big key here is, along the way, if you can find sponsors along the way, they're the individuals, as I said before, that see something in you that you had not realized it in yourself. Has anyone had a sponsor that has done that for them? Yeah? And your first reaction to that sponsor? Oh, I can't do that. What are you, nuts? I got my first inroad for that, well, actually a couple before that, but there's one that was a big game changer for me in my joy matrix. The game changer was my old boss, Peter, and he said to me, I was a business analyst, senior business analyst. He said, I think you could be a service level manager. I said, a what? He said, a service level manager. You know, managing all the services and doing all that sort of thing. You know, ITIL. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, I think you'd be really good at it. I said, no, I don't think so. You mean I have to manage all the Unix guys? God, have you seen them? God, no. And he said, yeah, no, I think you could do it. So I did it. And I did service level management and did it for like 4 years. I was pretty good at it because customer service is process. Remember back in Hungry Jack's, customer service, process. It all just filters through. So that's why it's really important to know what really floats your boat, because when you start to find it in a team and in an organisation, it starts to accelerate your career. Point of caution, however. You may have individuals, leaders that you work with that are, you think they're your sponsor. They come across as your sponsor, but then they give you some feedback. Who's gotten feedback? Who gets feedback? Yeah? I'm going to give you a little bit of a story. So my IT director at an organisation, and I'm just going to be a bit broader on the organisation because that individual doesn't need to know. It's in my book though, but I didn't call it out. Change names to protect the innocent. He had resigned, had to give 6 months' notice. I've been doing a lot of the functioning as the 2IC to the IT director, so I said to him, I am going to apply for your role. He said, oh, absolutely. Yes, you should. You absolutely should. You've been doing most of it. You're doing a great job. I want to give you some feedback, though. So how about we meet up, it was Thursday, how about we meet up tomorrow, Friday morning for some breakfast, and then I can give you some feedback, which will really help you when you apply for the role. I was like, oh, awesome, great. In like Flynn, right? I get home, I say to my husband, you know, my boss is going to give me this feedback. I can't wait. I'm really excited. I'm going to go for this role. It could be a big pay jump. It's really the direction that I want to go to. I was pushing to get to CIO, so this is that next step on. Feeling great. Get in the next morning. Now, my hair was much longer than it is now, and it's important to this story. And it's very curly. You might not notice it here, but it is very curly. So I go for breakfast. We're sitting in a nice corner table in this cafe, and he said to me, I need to give you some honest feedback because this is really important. You will not be considered for this role if you don't do something about your hair. It is too curly. You come across as crazy and unhinged. Then he said, and these colours you wear. You need to wear more muted colours because these bright colours add to your level of craziness. And you're not going to be considered for this role if you don't do something about that. Now, he gave me lots of other feedback. I'm certain, I just don't remember any of it. I just remember that. And so I'm like, wow, okay. So I got home and I said to my husband, well, this is what he said. And he said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. And so I went and straightened my hair, had it chemically straightened and spent $350 getting it chemically straightened. Trying to blow dry it out every day because my hair was crazy and curly. So I did that, rocked up to the office. But before I did that morning, I remember standing in the bathroom and looking at myself in the mirror thinking, who are you? I just looked like everybody else that had straight hair, and I went to the office and I spent 3 months with that stupid facade of straight hair, and there's a photo in the book with me with straight hair, I kid you not. Until they hired a 45-year-old white man from the UK, brought him out because he was a good bloke, and they gave him the director role. And they didn't even interview me. And I realised at that moment, I don't belong here. It is a great place to work and everyone else feels that they belong. But if I can't be me, my authentic self, crazy curly hair and bright clothes me, then I don't belong. So though they had the diversity, equity and inclusion balance pretty good, they missed the belonging piece because I felt like an outsider with my crazy curly hair. So what I thought was a sponsor derailed me. But what is most disappointing is not that he'd said that, because it came from a real place of compassion and he thought he was doing me a service. It was what I did with that information. So you're going to get feedback throughout your career. Choose what you use and what resonates for you. But whatever you do, don't straighten your hair. I think I've sort of hit it. I think we're pretty much done. That's kind of my story. So if anyone's got questions.
I was going to just make an observation as well, because what I see a lot is, and I respect anyone who works, but people do get trapped in corporate work. So, which is understandable because people have responsibilities, you've got bills to pay, families to provide for, etc., etc. So what advice can you give maybe, Mary-Beth, around just drilling down? Because I do think in society as a whole, we tend to wait until things hit rock bottom before people think, I better do something about it. So thinking about elements of your work that might, obviously stuff might frustrate you, but also what you enjoy so that you can actually start to try and, change the course of your career before you get really rock bottom, which I see quite often,
Yeah, you do, because you see people who are at that moment that, I have to change.
Yeah.
And they allow that to happen. Look, in an economic downturn, we're hitting one right now, it's a bit scary, right? There's a lot of people out looking for roles. You might sit back thinking, it's too unstable. I'm of the opinion you need to push and go for it anyway. If you work out what brings you joy, and if you're doing if you're at the end of each week doing your achievement journal, writing that down, if you are not enjoying your role, you're not really going to be achieving the things you wanted, it will start to show up in your achievement journal. When you cease to be able to sort of put things in there and cease to be able to say, yeah, I enjoyed this week. Now, 50%, maybe 50, 60% of the time, you've got the admin and the minutiae of the job that you do, which is, might not be great, but it is just part of what you have to do. But if 40 to 50% of it's really super enjoyable, except for some of those outliers, then you might be on the right task. I mean, what is it saying? If you do something you love, you don't feel like you're working a day in your life. Well, honestly, I was doing stuff that I loved, and there was stuff about it that, there's nothing glamorous about lugging kit in and out of a gig, right? It's just the stuff you have to do. So you need to be writing these things down and keeping a track, and question yourself. Ask the people around you as well, because as you're feeling more and more dissatisfied in your role, the way with which you treat the people that you love, will also be something that will be impacted.
I think, Mary-Beth, the reason that sometimes people do feel quite stuck, it's a confidence thing, and then it's a lack of confidence to get into their discomfort zone and push themselves. And I think your advice about at the end of every week reflecting on what you've achieved and the value that you've had, even if you're not sort of taking any active steps to make a change, that's building your confidence. Because if you're putting into a journal what you've achieved, the value that you've brought, even, things that you've done to make other people happy and bring other people joy, you're actually building your confidence in yourself. And then that sort of mindset will give you more confidence in a step towards your plan. Because I think finding your North Star and dreaming, sometimes people feel that the lack of confidence to do that. So I really like your idea of taking those small steps. Is there any sort of other advice that you'd give someone who's feeling stuck and just not feeling that ability to get uncomfortable?
If you've got a mentor, talk to your mentor. And you are right with the journal. I am working with a woman at the moment who was made redundant, and she got into a role, was really excited. They let her go 5.5 weeks later, and she's feeling really low. And so I just encourage her to go back to her achievement journal. Go back and read. Remember the good stuff you've done, because you know you can do this. Sometimes you're going to hit road bumps. But talk to a mentor or a coach, all right? And ask them the question. A mentor will, if they're a good mentor, they'll give you the warts and all advice. They will tell you those things that you might not necessarily want to hear. And that uncomfortable space, being in that uncomfortable space doesn't last forever, okay? It doesn't last forever. If you keep remembering who you were, what you've come from, you understand all of the work you've done, you understand all of your transferables. When you see a job ad and you want to go for that, then if you only hit 5 of the key criteria, still apply. Throw your hat in the ring, because you will have transferables that will tick off other boxes. It's just what you see in yourself and how you project yourself. And it is absolutely a confidence thing.
I also think, the whole process of applying for jobs, you must feel like CV is going into a black hole. Recruiters probably don't often bother to, get back in touch with you. But I think the beauty of LinkedIn now is you'll have all worked at various different companies. There's probably someone somewhere who's got a connection into that business. So I think the more you can do to get yourself ahead of the pack, basically go round sort of the job application process driven by an HR talent team, that's probably going to set yourself up for more success. So I'd encourage people to be really active on LinkedIn for sure. And then the other thing, we haven't really spoken too much about values, although there's a lot of inference around values. Have a good idea around what your values are, what you stand for, and then try to overlay that when you're looking at organisations. And ultimately, it comes down to people, because I don't know about everyone here, but the more experience you've got, the more it's around the people I'm working with. Almost, it's more important than the company or the type of work I'm doing, to be quite honest with you. Because if you're working with good people, then you're sort of 2/3 of the way there. So I'd focus on that as well.
So, and that's the branding piece. We didn't really touch on branding, that sort of idea of internal, external, and virtual brand. LinkedIn is a virtual brand. So if you look at, you're both on LinkedIn, have a look at your LinkedIn profiles. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, you actually totally get my brand straight away. But understand that it takes a while to build that. But you use LinkedIn because recruiters now are absolutely on that platform. The information that you put in, really important. The words that are directly underneath your name at the top, don't put your job title. That's not where that goes. Put in those things that you're really passionate about. Because that becomes metadata that they will actually search upon. And LinkedIn is now becoming quite the recruitment tool.
Well, LinkedIn, I'm pretty cynical about social media generally, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of LinkedIn drives me bonkers because it's like Facebook for business, and it's got a load of rubbish on there, people doing fundraisers, whereas in the old days, they just do the fundraiser, but it seems everyone wants to sort of share it. And I get, so, not being too cynical about it, but I do think it's a really important platform that you've got to be sort of in it to win it, really, because if you're not putting yourself out there and getting your skills across, the people who will be half as competent as you, but they're busy singing from the rooftops how great they are, and people will believe them. So I think it's getting that balance between being authentic, but it is a game you've got to play, really. That's the reality of it.
Be in
but I'm
service
just sort
of
of really
others.
torn on it.
It's about being in service of others. What LinkedIn likes is that.
Yeah.
It doesn't like you standing up there going, I'm so awesome. It likes you to be in service of others. And that's really what that's what leadership is, isn't it?
Yeah.
The one thing that totally floats our boat as leaders, and tell me if I'm wrong in this, is that when I see somebody that's worked for me or is working for me achieving their career goals and their aspirations, man, I feel really good. That makes me feel really, really good. And that's why we do it.
Mary-Beth, thank you for an inspirational discussion. Really appreciated it. And I wish everyone a happy Tuesday. Thank you.
If you want me to sign the books, let me know. I'll grab a